Daddy?
What is it, my child?
Daddy, what's going on here? Why is everybody singing? And how come the table is set with matzah instead of bread?
Well, you see.
Daddy?
Uh-huh.
Why is this night different from all other nights? Why?
Welcome to the 5th annual Great Canadian Seder. This is our annual tradition carried over from our Bonjour Chai days and now part of the Not in Heaven universe. Each year we get a group of Canadians, politicians, artists, and other bon vivants and ask them to share with us their Seder memories or a bit of wisdom from the Haggadah. We stitch it all together for you to enjoy. You might be cleaning, you might be cooking, you might be deep at work on some advanced prep for the Afikoman hiding mission. Whatever it might be, we are here to accompany you and get you in a Seder frame of mind.
Why?
One. Now number two.
Why?
Number three.
Why?
Number four.
Guys, it's our 5th Seder. Our second one together, because this is the first anniversary of us doing a show. So welcome to our Seder.
It's very landmark. It feels quite symbolic and special when you put it like that, Avi. That's great. Chag Sameach, team. What a year.
I'm excited for us to have been doing this for a year, but I am in denial that Pesach is in a very few days. So it's freaking me out a little bit.
What do you guys do to get into the Seder mood, the Pesach mood? Like, where do you know that, like, oh, Pesach is here and I'm like starting to think about it and get into it?
I've been listening to all this Pesach music with my kids in the car. There's like a whole genre of Pesach music that I feel like I've discovered, including Paro Be Pajamas. Do you guys know that song?
I do not.
Teach me. I'm doing some Pesach concerts coming up. Teach me this song.
You guys should listen to it. It's amazing.
What's it called?
It's like a Chabad, like hip-hoppy kind of ditty, and it's like Paro Be Pajama Be'emsa Laila, Paro Be Pajama Be'emsa Laila.
All right now.
And then the chorus is Hageula Ba Be'emsa Laila
Hageula ba be'emsa layla, hageula ba be'emsa layla, hageula ba.
Anyway, I'm just feeling very like emotional. I don't know. Like it's
Pesach
Pesach
spirit.
and there's been this war going on since Purim, and talking to my kids about Pesach, it like, I don't know, it's making me very emotional. Plus last night I was looking at all the images of Haggadot we have in the Posen library that I like sent to you very early in the morning. And that's like, I don't know, that's where I'm at.
Do you guys get into the whole like a cappella parody, Maccabeats, Weistad,
Yes,
613?
we were all in on that for Purim. And so the kids are actually asking for the Purim songs, and I'm redirecting them that no, now it's Pesach. We have Pesach songs. We got to school a few minutes early, so I found a YouTube of Chad Gadya in English because I wanted them to understand the story, but it's also a little bit horrifying. So it was like exciting, like, oh, my dad bought me a goat, but then bad things happened to that goat, which I knew, but they're not ready to appreciate it yet.
It's one bad thing after another. That's why the Chad Gadya is a funny one. But yeah, no, I'm fascinated. I've got we always switch our dishes. We get pretty into it, and I don't keep kosher. I'll still go out during Passover. I just won't eat any bread. There was this buddy of mine who worked at this cheeseburger joint, and he used to bring in matzah, and he would put my patty between pieces of matzah for me in the restaurant. Like there's just this regular like place, and I loved it because the grease would sop into the matzah, and it would make the matzah not so cracky and crumbly, but it would kind of hold the integrity a little bit more of almost like a burger.
Guys, is Pesach stressful for you, or like I'm stressed? I'm procrastinating my stress, but like, what's it like for you guys and your family?
It's got to be stressful, right? Like I don't usually do the hosting, but now that we're more adult and we've got kids in the house and there's considerations about going to bed and these sorts of things, we wanted to really get into it, and we've got our new house that we're in, so we're really excited to host. But there comes with a lot of stress. I just feel like it's just busy. It's just very like
there's a lot to do. There's a lot of
like
prep.
I'm leading services at our first day in the morning, second day in the morning, seventh day in the morning, eighth day in the morning, a couple of lunch and learns or something during Chol HaMoed. Like it's a really that on top of the fact that you're eating a lot of matzah and your body kind of starts to push back on you around like day 3, day
whole wheat.
all of that together
much
makes
better.
it just busy.
Whole wheat matzah is less terrible on the system. Pro tip.
I don't get stressed about Pesach, but yeah, it's a lot of work. I think, part of it is that, it's our 20th year of marriage, and that means that I have the routine. I have the lists. I know what the shopping is. I know what the cooking takes. I got it. It's not the year that my oven died on Erev Pesach.
Oof.
Like in middle of cooking, and I'm like shuttling food to a neighbor to try to get some stuff cooked and moving stuff to the barbecue to get stuff cooked there.
Oh,
like,
that's awful.
But stuff has happened, and we made it work. And so I know that like whatever is thrown at me, I know what I'm doing. I've learned, not the hard way, but I've learned through experience that at 11 o'clock, nobody wants a big Seder meal, right? This is not like our Seder starts at 6 o'clock. Right. And so by 9, or not 9, by 7:30, everybody's eating. And so you have this massive meal. We don't get to eat till like 11:30 sometimes, 10:30. And so I don't make a big meal anymore. I do a basic meal, some nice elevated food, but like nothing huge.
I was going to say, do you make the same thing every year, or do you?
No. I mean, I have a lot of dishes that I draw on, and there's a lot of classics for Pesach. My classic that I do for the second days, I do the Seder plate salad, where I take all of the items from the Seder plate, not the actual ones that I've been sitting there wilting for days, but like I put in like 2 different types of lettuce. I make a dressing that's charoset inspired and sliced egg. And I put in, instead of the shank bone, I'll make little lamb meatballs that act as like croutons in the salad. So it's sort of like a Cobb salad-ish sort of thing.
Cool.
But it's my Seder plate salad.
Nice.
That sounds really great. Seder. Did you come up with that idea yourself?
I did.
That's great. I love that idea. That's super cool.
Copyrighted. No, it's not. Everybody should go and take it.
Another moment of genius, Rabbi Feingold. I'm impressed.
Let's kick things off with some stories of Seders, traditional and not. Some people, like playwright Jordi Mand, want to do things just like her bubby. Others, like Alicia Richler, the new editorial director of the CJN, or author Ayelet Tsabari, like to mix things up. And sometimes you get to work with a clean slate. Like Jared Lindzon, author of the new book Do More in 4, who tells us about his pandemic Seder.
Hi everyone, my name is Jordi Mand. I'm a writer for theater, film, and TV. I'm Jewish, and I'm also a mom. So what does all of this have to do with Passover? Well, every single year, my family and I would congregate at my Bubby Gertie's house for Passover Seders, for the first night and the second night. And it was hands down my favorite time of year. Everybody would come. There was always so much joy and laughter and love and jokes and pranks even and song. It just felt like going to a rock concert. It was the most celebratory period of time, and I loved it. And I loved being in my Bubby's kitchen with her and standing side by side and watching her place every single item on her Seder plate. And her Seder plate was gorgeous. It was old. It was beautiful. It was heavy. It had a gold trim around it, real gold. And this beautiful hand-painted floral pattern in pastel colors. I loved her Seder plate, and I would follow behind her really closely as she brought that heavy, beautiful Seder plate to the table and laid it down right in the middle, and everyone would stop what they were doing and all together say, ooh. And it always felt so important and felt like a spotlight had been turned on the stage. And I remember thinking even as a kid, I want my Seder plate when I get older to be just as special. So fast forward many, many years. Unfortunately, my Bubby Gertie is no longer with us. I am hosting my first Seder as an adult in my first home. I'm looking around everywhere. I'm looking in boxes, in the basement, in cupboards, in drawers. And I realize I don't have a Seder plate. I don't know what happened to my Bubby Gertie's Seder plate. My parents have Seder plates, but they're using them for their Seder in London, Ontario, and I was in Toronto. In all my years of traveling, I've never found a Seder plate that I wanted to call my own. I was Seder plateless, and I had people that were arriving. I'm searching high and low. Finally, my daughter comes into the room. She says, Mommy, what are you doing? I said, honey, I'm looking for a Seder plate. I thought I had one, but I guess I don't. She said, well, why don't we make one? I said, honey, I can't make a Seder plate. I couldn't possibly. And then I went on to tell her all about my Bubby Gertie's Seder plate and how perfect it was and how I wanted a Seder plate of my own to be just as perfect. And she said, let's just make one. So what did we do? We printed off a Seder plate coloring book page, and we sat down together at the table where we were going to be having our Seder, and together we colored it in. And it was amazing because I took her through every item and talked to her about why we include them on our Seder plate and what they mean for the Passover experience. And I immediately had flashbacks of my grandmother doing the very same thing with me. And when we were done, we cut it out and we put it onto a plate and we put it out in the middle of the table. And I looked at it and I said, ooh. And my daughter said, ooh. And we stood there side by side holding hands. And I realized it's not about having the perfect Seder plate. It's not about having the perfect anything. It's about doing it together. It's about doing it together, and it's about doing it for each other. And it's about talking about why we do things. And it's talking about how we want to do things moving forward. And in that moment, that Seder plate, that colored-in Seder plate that we got off of Google, was absolutely perfect. And we've been using it ever since. And I have to tell you, I love it.
Hello, I'm Alicia Richler, the editorial director for the Canadian Jewish News. I'm fortunate that I've had the opportunity to celebrate Passover in many places, from Toronto to Israel, from South Florida to Montreal. But for me, being the host of my own Seder in my own home, it's something I cherish most. Of course, sitting around a table for hours, reading and listening, okay, at least in my family, that can sometimes be tiring, okay, even boring, especially when I was a child. So for me and my husband, this is even before we had our own children, we decided once we hosted our own Seders, we wanted to add a bit of fun. And over the years, we add more creativity and more participation at key points across the Seder. It begins with setting up my Seder table. I've got 3 kids. All 3, they have attended Jewish day school at least some parts of their lives. So that means I've collected a complete set, times 3, of everything from tabletop items like decorative paper Seder plates, silkscreen matzah covers, very oddly shaped afikomen bags, strange papier-mâché bowls that we were told are supposed to be used for salt water, finger puppets, so much more. So the whole table is set up right away with an air of fun. Where are some key spots that we like to add in fun and things that I remember and hopefully my family remembers for many years? The 10 plagues. We all do the 10 plagues in our Seders. We read it from the Haggadah. My household, we act it out. Everybody is participating. They're throwing plastic frogs across the table. Marshmallows are put on the face to represent boils. We've got tipping plastic cows for theirs. On the final plague, though, we do calm it down a bit. We ask the firstborn of all the families at the table to stand up. It's a bit of a serious moment, and we like to remind everyone what the impact would be on our family if we lost all of our firstborns in a sudden moment. As we move on through the Seder, we do all the reading and the singing, and we eat and we eat and we eat, and then we continue on. I always have a fond memory of a Seder years ago when we got to Eliyahu's cup. One year when our kids were really young, I decided to dress up my brother, head to toe, as Eliyahu. I gave him a beard, a hat, a robe. He looked extremely silly. We snuck him out the back door of the house quietly. No one knew. Only my brother and I were up to this. And then when we got to the Aliyahu cup, I messaged him. He knocked on the door. We opened the door, and in he came in full regalia, in full character, to drink from Eliyahu's cup. I couldn't get him to do it again, but it was great that year. Everybody looks forward to the final song at our Seder, Chad Gadya. It's a favorite of mine, and over the years, I've collected all kinds of masks and costumes and all kinds of regalia for this song. It's on the last page of the Haggadah. If you come to my Seder, you know you stay for this. I think people really look forward to it. I assign a character, adults, kids, all of it. We get a barking dog, the meowing cat, sound effects for water and fire. And honestly, every year, I never quite know what the angel of death is going to do. We end our Seder laughing every year. It doesn't matter how tired we are, how long the night was, how messy my kitchen is. That final song, we sing it loud, and it really helps us smile and looks forward to how crazy we might be the next year.
As someone who was born and raised Jewish, I sort of take for granted the scale and complexity of hosting a Seder for an extended family. And I think the first time where I really appreciated not just the complexity of hosting, but also the amount of thought and care that has to go into planning and hosting a Seder in particular was during COVID. It was just me and my wife in our one-bedroom condo in downtown Toronto. And coincidentally, we got engaged on the very first day of 2020, and she started the conversion process soon after. But it was kind of appropriate and almost perfect that it worked out that way. It didn't feel that way at the time, but we were now responsible for hosting our own little Seder, just the two of us. And it was a great experience for her. She had been to Seders before, but to have the experience of hosting one for the first time, which probably wouldn't have happened in any other circumstance, the very year that she is converting and at the very moment that she and I are attending classes about the Passover Seder and what's involved and the story behind it. We got a little help from some very kind care packages that were shipped downtown from my parents and grandparents. And it was a very different kind of Seder, of course, because everything was different during the pandemic. A little lonelier because we didn't have the big family with us. Not as much singing and, it's a very different feeling. But it was also really special because we went through all the rituals, just the two of us, and, having been the guy that just shows up and got to enjoy the Seder, or just followed my dad around the house as he got rid of the chametz. And, that was now on me. In a lot of ways, it was isolating, again, like everything in 2020, but in a lot of ways, it was kind of empowering and exciting and made us feel more connected because we were doing things for ourselves for the first time and not just following others.
Hello, my name is Ayelet Tsabari. I'm an author. I lived in Canada for 20 years, 11 years in Vancouver, 9 years in Toronto, and now I am back in Tel Aviv. When I think of Pesach, I think of our Seder, which in my family we call it Seder. Seder means order in Hebrew. Seder means disorder. When I was a child, it was, the regular kind of thing. We did a pretty ordinary Seder. It was long. It was tedious sometimes. It was still fun. I think one of my favorite parts of the Seder as a child was the part where we dramatized the Exodus from Egypt. All the kids would walk into the room carrying bags and a stick, and the adults would ask them, "Where are you coming from?" And we said Egypt. "And where are you heading?" And we said Jerusalem. But when I was 10, my father passed away. And I think after he passed away, things became a little more lenient, a little less meticulous, to the point that we are at right now, when the Seder is a disorder. Now, when I say disorder, I want to be clear that it's awesome. When we meet people the next day and, everyone's like, "Oh, how was the Seder?" And most people go like, "Oh, they groan and it's tiring. And my grandfather took forever. And when do you eat?" And then they ask me how it was for me. And I always say it was great. Because the first thing is that we kind of decided that we just do what we want. We can start anywhere in the Haggadah, and we can skip to the parts that we really like. We may skip parts we don't like, or we may change the wording a little bit to make it more to our liking. But the best part is the singing. And I come from a Yemeni family, and I come from a particularly musical family. There's a lot of people in my family, my siblings, my nephews, my nieces, who sing and play music and study music. And in Yemeni traditions, music is a big thing. You know, we all sing, and it's the musical traditions of Yemeni people is something that I've always been fascinated by and interested in. So we sing loudly, and we drum on the table, and we harmonize, and we sometimes yell, and we sometimes rap, and we're traditionally the loudest house on the street in the Seder. It goes a little wild, I admit. And I think, you know, beside the fact that it's really fun, but there's also a liberation, and I think it embodies the spirit of the Seder, you know. We are truly free. And the one last thing I'm going to say about it is, you know, when I came back to Israel 8 years ago, I really wanted my child to experience, you know, that kind of we're a large family, there's 6 siblings. And I'm just, every time, she loves it. It's her favorite day of the year. She talks about it all the time. My family, you know, they're just like, they're loud and they sing. And I'm just so happy that I was able to give her that.
What are some of the like big moments that you guys have remembered about your Seders in the past?
No, I think that the Seders kind of, they feel like they wash and they build up on me. Like I remember all the first Seders and all the childhood Seders, you know, my Zeta, not a super religious person, but it was kind of his duty to organize things and assign the reading parts. And I used to sit next to him, and he used to kind of show me the way, which in retrospect was just to kind of take over for him. Because he didn't want to do it anymore. And I even remember like being a little kid, and I had my great-grandfather who was from the old country, who mumbled his way through the whole thing and sat on the afikomen so that no one could find it, like being very, very little in a big extended second Seder where there are all these other people and the songs and the singing. Like it all kind of washes over me and builds up on me, and like I feel it all the time. And now the last few years have been really, really cool with us having little kids and there being like this new generation at the Seder, after it was really the same cast of characters for a very long time. It's interesting you ask about like kind of one moment. I feel all these. I remember the year my Baba said, I'm going to do a game. I'm going to hide a few raisins in some of the matzah balls. And if you're eating the soup and a raisin pops out, you have to tell a joke. Or a story. Like this is a big, like where did she get this? Where did this come from? What? But I remember that, you know, like I remember all these great moments. It's so wonderful.
That reminds me that my bubby of blessed memory, who also used to host like 25-person Seders in her apartment that I only have very fond memories of. Last year, I told the story about how my cousins and I hid the afikomen in a chametz pot. My bubby had this practice of men would get 2 matzah balls and women would get 1. Ooh. That was her like matzah ball minhag.
Okay. Whoa.
So it's not a raisin prize in a matzah ball, but anyway. So those are fond childhood memories. But my best Seder is like, this is a little bit of like a weird bittersweet kind of thing, was that first
You mean
Seder.
like a maror dipped in charoset?
Oh, but good job.
It's like a rabbi dad joke for the Seder.
Yeah. The first Seder at the beginning of COVID, when we didn't know how long we were going to be in isolation, and you know, all of our big plans to be with the rest of humanity had fallen apart. I don't even think we had plans yet because COVID started right around before him. Like we didn't have anything firmed up. And nerds that we are, we sat at the table, just the 2 of us. My now 7-year-old was a year old maybe upstairs. And we sat with 2 facsimile Haggadot, medieval Haggadot, that we had been given for our wedding by Phil's aunt. And we just nerded out on these two medieval Haggadot, like looking at the illustrations, because the illustrations always tell you so much. And when the text would differ, right? When one of us would read something and it would be different than what we were expecting or what we were used to, or, I would go down some rabbit hole about a midrash. Like, there's not so many people who have infinite patience for that, but I happened to marry one of them, and it was great.
I'm surprised that you didn't bring up the famous image of the man pointing to his wife for maror.
What?
Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
There's this famous image from one of the medieval Haggadot, and it has like the different images of Pesach and Matzah and Maror. And for the image of Maror, he's pointing, like, it's the husband, the head of the Seder is pointing to his wife.
What did you? That's.
I would love to see that. Please send it.
Yeah. Since COVID, actually, since there was a pandemic and we had a Seder or two that was just us, my wife insists now, at least one Seder of the two, to have just the family that's here.
I like that.
Just us. And it's gotten really much better over the past couple of years because the kids have become old enough not just to like repeat these Divrei Torah that they got from school that they wrote down and that they're just reading off of a page. They actually have insights and they actually share stuff, and it feels so much different when the kids hit that age. And I remember when we had a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old, I remember putting her to sleep early that night, and I would say good night, and then I would be like, I want you to know tonight is a very big night in like Jewish history, that like many, many, many thousands of years ago, right, there was a bad person and he enslaved us, and tonight was the night we went free. Good night. And then now it's they're the ones giving us all this wisdom, and it feels great.
What you just said, Avi, I'm always so impressed that our ancestors nailed it on how Passover was going to be meaningful. One day your kids will ask you, why do you do this? Like, that idea is thousands of years old, and it plays out every year for so many people. I remember reading that one of those Pew surveys, right, where they said that the Seder, attendance at some kind of Seder, whether it's like yours where it starts after it's so dark that you're like, what? Or it starts at dinner, or anything in between, is one of the most popular or common Jewish practices for Jewish people in America, like attendance at a Seder. Synagogue attendance on Yom Kippur is nowhere near what attending a Seder is like. And every year it plays out, and it's like you told your kid this exact night. When you talk about, do you have moments of insight, like when those sorts of things dawn on me in the preparation for the Seder, I always feel like I get more insights building up to the Seder. The build up to Pesach, the thinking about it is always so incredible.
V'higata levincha bayom hahu lemor. This central line in the Haggadah tells us that our obligation is to teach our children about the Exodus on the very day it happened. This generational transmission is at the heart of so many people's Seder memories. Let's listen to Rabbi Carnie Rose of Shaarey Zedek in Winnipeg, PEI-based writer and entrepreneur Martin Rutte, and Ben Carr, the Member of Parliament for Winnipeg South Centre, all share their thoughts on what happens as a new generation takes the baton.
Why, on this night, are we especially at ease?
Hi, my name is Rabbi Carnie Rose, and I'm here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. So I have to say that the most important Pesach, I think, for me to this day, and I'm closer to 60 than I am to 50, so it's been a lot of years since this happened, is a time that we were having Seder together with Rabbi Arthur Green and lots of other wonderful people who were living in the Boston area. And the starim were long, and they were intense, and they were deep, and they were quite meaningful. And one year, Art comes to the Seder, and he says, tonight is the first night, and we will have the Seder together. But tomorrow night, the second night, I'm going to hand the Seder over to the next generation. And you guys are going to be in charge. So I am one of 5 children. All of us, there are 4 boys. We are all rabbis, and my sister married a rabbi. So all 5 are rabbinic families now. And this is when we're quite young. I don't even think we're in university yet. But we all then took very, very seriously the night of the first Seder, and all day after the first Seder, heading to the second Seder, preparing for the Seder. And we all, kind of talked about it, and we kind of, I'll do this and you do that. And in fact, it was one of the most beautiful studying that we ever had. Why? Because we were sort of put on the spot to prepare. And what was, I think, most amazing towards the end of the Seder was some of the sharing that happened from the elder generation, then sharing some of the experiences that they had. And so it was this wonderful intergenerational opportunity. And there were lots of laughs, but there are also as many, I think, tears that flowed about the kind of the passing of the baton, midor ledor, from generation to generation. But also, I think, the continuity, the notion that we were going to continue to have these very intense experiences. And so it stands out to me as one of the most profound experiences that I have. And if I have any wish is that I have now children. My eldest is 27, my next is 25, 23, and then 21. I have one rabbi in that group as well. But my hope is, regardless of the rabbinic status, that my kids at some point in time will take over this tradition of facilitating the Seder. So there's a wonderful teaching in the Talmud that answers the words, nitzchuni vanai nitzchuni. My children have overcome me, have overtaken me. And whether the Talmud means that in some kind of, lachrymose, sad kind of way, or whether that is, a kind of a gleeful way of saying my children have overcome me, I'm hoping for a time when my children will overcome me and they will hand the Seder over to our children as well. It won't be this year, I don't think, because they're all sort of busy with their own realities. But in the future, I look forward to the time when I nitzchuni banai, that my children will take over and lead the Seder, and we will sort of sit back and enjoy and bask in the glow of the generational transference of the experience of facilitating a Seder that is meaningful, that is deep, that is existential, that is consequential.
So my name is Martin Rutte, and I live in Prince Edward Island with my wife, Maida. So I'm a management consultant. I wrote, the Chicken Soup books? I was co-author of Chicken Soup for the Soul at Work, and I author of a book called Project Heaven on Earth, about people's vision for the kind of life, work, and nation and world they want. And to be asked to go back to talk about Pesach just was a flood of memories. So I want to begin when I was a little kid, and we go to my Baba Chaika, and I'm getting verklempt just at the beginning of the story here. So I remember my father scooping up the chametz with a feather and burning it. I remember sitting at the kids' table, always in suits and ties for the kids and dresses for the girls. I remember eating red chrein, and because it was so hot, I would always put like a spoonful of sugar on it. The Half Moon jelly candies, the kosher marshmallows covered in coconut, and the kosher for Pesach Coca-Cola. The Coca-Cola had a cap that in Hebrew on the cap, on the side of the cap, said kosher LePesach. And that was the only Coca-Cola that we could drink at the Seder. And then we got our first watermelon, or the way they pronounced it, watermelon, because my father, Harry Herschel, and my uncle, Jack Shika, owned a fruit store. And we get the first watermelon of the season. Now you get watermelon, 24 hours a day all year long, but not in those days. And of course, Chateau Manischewitz wine from the Manischewitz Estate Winery in Bordeaux, France. Not. What would Pesach be without it? And then my grandmother, Alav Shalom, would get up and do the speech in Yiddish. About, should I do it in Yiddish a little bit? So, sie hat aufstehen, sie hat gerät, zum ganzen Mischbuch gedachten, fin, also mit darf leben. So she stood up and spoke to all the family there about how we should live. Man soll arbeiten schwer, man soll nicht liegen, you should work hard, you shouldn't lie. Man darf nicht, man tue nicht gammeln, you shouldn't steal. I mean, she didn't read from a script. She just, she stood up and spoke. And it was, for me, always the highlight. And years later, when I was at a cousin's Seder, and all that, my parental generation that were gone, I used to stand up and give the speech also in Yiddish. And I would not say it in English. And so one of or two of my cousins who were able to translate would translate. I remember sometimes going, no, that's not right. It's not the right translation. So that was my father's mother, Alav Shalom. And then my mother's father, Herschel, who was a Cohen. I remember as a kid, and everybody has laughed at me all years, I remember seeing the wine in the cup for Eliyahu. I remember seeing that go down on its own. Nobody believes me. I saw it. To this day, I saw it. And then we would do our own seders in Hamilton. We had 6 sets of dishes, 2 normal, 2 for guests, and 2 for Pesach. And so the kitchen had tape on the cupboard, so you couldn't open the cupboards, so you knew exactly what not to touch. And I can remember the food was brisket and chicken and potato kugel, with a thick crust on it. All I cared about was the crust. So it was always a fight because there was not enough crust for everybody. So, and then my father, Alav Shalom, passed away. And I remember sitting at the head of the table the first year that I had to lead the Seder. And I can remember sitting there going, oh my God, this is up to me now. That was a real transition point, very, very clearly. And then we also had Seders at my sister Fridel's in Toronto. And one year we invited a very dear friend of mine, a mentor, ready for this? Anglican Bishop Henry Hill. Bishop Hill. Because he'd always wanted to see what a Seder is. I was, Henry, come. He said, and so then we had, of course, Afikoman, right? And I said, Henry, go, find the Afikoman. So he goes and he finds it, right? And he comes back, I found it. I said, well, you get the money. Well, I can't take the money. Henry, you found the Afikoman. The rule is whoever finds it gets the money. And we were dying. He was a bishop of the Anglican. Oh, he was in charge of relations between the Anglican Church worldwide and the churches of the Eastern Rite. I mean, he was a heavy duty hitter. And then I remember my cousin Visha is probably the funniest person in the universe, without a doubt. And he would tell jokes. And I remember once laughing so hard, I actually was frightened for myself. I thought, I'm in big trouble here. I mean, I got out of it, but, and I remember his wife, Val, Alav Shalom, and my wife, Maid, in the kitchen, laughing their heads off at the eccentricities of both their Jewish husbands. So those are all my wonderful, wonderful memories of Seders at my Bubba's, my Zadie's, our own home, my sister, Fidel, and my cousin, Mish and Val. And it just, what a wonderful exercise. So thank you, Zach and Yisher Koach for asking me to do this. It's been a great memory jogger.
I just wanted to ask if you could say 1 or 2 things about what it's like being Jewish on PEI.
We don't have a shul here. We don't have a rabbi. We have a community like any other community. People who are very active, and people are somewhat active, and people are not active. The Seder is one of the highlights of the year. Last year we had 100 people. People bring their own food. We make sure that no chametz and, of course, no non-kosher stuff. And we lead the service. I mean, we have summer picnics here. We do a small Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. I mean, there's a vibrant Jewish community, I would say, here. And it's very small, so everybody knows everybody. And it's only 180,000 people in the entire island. There's about 250, 300, which expands, of course, in the summer.
I'm Rabbi Laura Duhan-Kaplan, and I live in Vancouver. I work as the Dean of ALEPH's Jewish Renewal Seminary, educating future rabbis, cantors, chaplains, and spiritual directors. This year at Pesach, I am thinking about something that the great medieval Jewish philosopher Yehuda Halevi said. He said that in every generation we make the story of the Exodus true for us because of the great passion that we bring to telling the story. Pesach is one of my favorite holidays because of the creativity involved in it. Every year, people find new ways to tell the story at their Seder. They make up new games for children to play so that they can learn and be entertained and be engaged. They write new poems. They compose new songs. They use the ideas in the Exodus story to discuss and gain a deeper understanding of oppression in our world today. When it comes to food, people create new versions of traditional recipes, making them tastier or vegan or more full of local foods. The creativity of Pesach is so beautiful, and I believe that it is one of the things that helps keep us alive and vibrant and growing as a Jewish community, Ledor Vador, from generation to generation.
My name is Ben Carr. I'm the Member of Parliament for Winnipeg South Centre.
So, about to tell me a little bit about your memories of everyone gathering in your home for Passover.
Yeah, well, we had a very large living room, and we had about 40 people around the Seder table every year at Passover when I was growing up. And it was a wonderful opportunity to get together with members of our extended family that you otherwise wouldn't see throughout the year. And I can remember the hustle and bustle of the dinner, who was going to read what were the kids going to do, how much Manischewitz were we going to let a 12-year-old drink, all of those various things that happen around the excitement of Passover. I can remember my Uncle Richard with his very deep baritone voice would sit at the head of the table. He was one of the only ones who knew a pretty extensive amount of Hebrew. And I can always picture him leading us through much of the prayer, and then being the one who paid out when the Afikomen was found. So of course, he or she who doles out the gelt is always held in a high regard. I can remember having a little bit too much Manischewitz when I was maybe 12 or 13 years old. I think most young Jews probably had their first taste of wine around the Seder table. So I can remember what the feeling was like after having a few of those. I don't know if this is something that all Jewish families experience, but it's when you're singing Dayenu. And there's those verses where, so Dayenu, 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 and then there's the Dayenu. And no one's ever in sync. I don't know if it's like this, Zach, at your family, but the last Dayenu, there always seems to be somebody who throws an extra one in, and it tends to sit above the rest. And I don't know if that's unique to my family or if that's just common.
But that's your family tradition.
Indeed. Passover is just really, for me, a wonderful symbol of the way the Jewish people have persevered throughout history. And I think that feeling becomes more real in 2026 than perhaps it might have felt in 1996. Much of what we read about in the story of Passover, the treatment of the Jews, the Exodus, the search for belonging, the desire to fulfill the promise of our people, I think is unfortunately somewhat reminiscent of the type of isolation many Jews are feeling in the world today. So there's more power, I think, behind the message and symbolism of Passover, which used to be maybe just stories from the past, but today serve as more of a calling or a sense of belonging for many of us than they had before. To do so steeped in something with as much rich tradition as Passover is, I think reminds us that we are part of something larger than ourselves and that we belong to a community, globally speaking, that has persevered for thousands of years, and that as we find ourselves today members of a community that we too will persevere. And the way that we will move through these difficult moments is by continuing to embrace the traditions that have been passed on to us by those that came before.
And the Lord brought us forth out of Egypt with a mighty hand and outstretched arm, with great terribleness.
Do you have a favorite part of the Seder? Like, do you guys have a favorite? If I had to say to you, 15 steps in the Seder, Shulchan Aruch doesn't count. You can't do dinner. I think dinner's the easy cop-out, right? So do you have a favorite? Look at us nerding out on Pesach. What's your favorite step of the Seder, Avi?
Well, I mean, it would probably be a favorite step of Magid, right? To me is the ability to like find the one thing that I can actually learn something new every year within the Magid. If I had to pick a step of the 15 of like Kadesh Urchatz, whatever, Hallel. I love the idea that we sing because they sang on that night as they were like singing songs of praise as they were leaving, and we get to do that again. And we split it up. We start, and then before the meal, we start with these songs of praise, and then we finish our meal, and then we continue and have more songs of praise.
Can we go one more step? Do you have a favorite song within Hallel? Like, do you love B'tzei Yisrael or something like right out the gate or something like that? Or do you like...
You know what I like, actually? I like the fact that it has the shortest like chapter in the Tanakh, right? It's this 2-verse, Hallelu Hashem Kol Goyim.
Yeah.
Right. And it's this really nice self-contained little like psalm of praise.
Shabchuhu. Shabchuhu. Great word. Nice. Yedida, you got a favorite part of the Seder?
I think so. So I'm a midrashist, right? So the whole Seder is amazing. And I think it's bizarro a little bit that the whole framework of it is actually based on verses from Deuteronomy and not actually from the Exodus itself. Mm-hmm. But that is a subject for another time. I think Dayenu is ridiculous. Like the whole premise of it is, it's literally absurd, right? Like if any of those things had not happened, then like we would not be the people that we are today. Thank God. And so like buried right after Dayenu is this paragraph, right? Like Lefichach anachnu chayavim lahodot lahalel.
Yes.
Right. Therefore, we are obligated to give all this praise to God. And then that's really sort of like the entrance or the segue into Hallel. And I like that framing of like the absurd of Dayenu that I think is a lot like there's this poem, didn't any history majors, for want of a nail, the shoe was lost, for want of the shoe, the horse was lost, for want of the horse, the battle was lost. And then, right, like all of the implications, all for the want of a nail. And I think Dayenu is kind of similar. Yeah, I like the reminder that like we have these obligations to praise God. Like I think it's a really helpful framing. Just generally.
Do you have the 10 plague like kits or the finger puppets and the...
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about. We have like a Exodus from Egypt Lego kit, which is pretty cool. And so like we have props on the table.
Awesome. 10 plagues in a can. You've seen this one? 10 plagues in a can?
No.
Where there's like some kind of like toy-like representation for each of the plagues?
Yeah, for all of them. And I look at all of them every year, whether they're finger puppets, because I always want to see what they do with the last one. And there's always
not just
like
that one. That one's messed up, but also like cattle disease. What do they do for cattle disease?
Yeah. So it's one thing to have like a dead cow and whatever, but then there's like, you always get the little baby with the X on the eyes, and you're like, oh, come on, people.
So awful.
Come on, people. How do you... to me, the last plague is reason enough not to make any cutesy representations of the 9 others.
How about the fact that they're plagues? How about like the whole idea? We're talking about plagues. This is how we got out, by plaguing them. You can't turn that into a cute kid's toy. Why not turning the 4 sons or now the 4 kids into like toys or something? Like, why does it have to, or something from Dayenu? Well, I don't know. So 10 plagues?
One of the reasons, Matthew, I think also that I really like to have a lot of different Haggadot at the table is because it's always really interesting to see how any kind of illustration is always really interesting, right? So like now we have puppets and you can order 10 plagues off of Amazon. But before that, right, like the Haggadah is the most reproduced, reprinted, published, redone, done and done again Jewish book there is, full stop, I think by a long shot. And it's really interesting to look back at Haggadot from all different time periods. So I've been doing that because I'm me and I have a super cool job. I've been really struck this year thinking actually about little, dark like the 10th plague, Shvo Chamatcha, where we ask God to pour out his wrath on the nations. And some
Would
of the
you agree
nations.
a lot of people don't know that part of the Haggadah really well? Like, as with all things, some
you
things
don't
people
come back
know.
to it after dinner.
But nobody even still, like, I think people know. If they've said Eliyahu, they'd be like, oh yeah, he's got the cup on the table,
Right.
you open the door. But
And shout into the darkness. Yeah.
Do a lot of people read that? Like, Shvocha, or as my Bob would say, Shvocha Mascha, right? Like those are
do we
the
say it?
pronunciations. I know you guys do, but I'm saying that it's one of the things that I think is lost. And the Haggadah, if you do it in its fullness, there's so much nuance, right? Like everyone's in a rush to start earlier in the world that I come from and get to dinner, right? So certain things get cut. And then after dinner, it's like 50-50 if you're even getting the books and going for cups 3 and 4 and the songs at the end, right? Like this is for, I think, a lot of people's Seders. But even if you keep going, I don't know how many people say at the table, pour out thy wrath upon the nations or whatever.
Well,
like,
I think a lot of people
go after our enemies.
skip it
right?
now. I do think that that's a thing.
I've always framed it as, you know what? Sometimes it's important for our enemies to have like wrath poured upon them, but it's not our job. We ask God to do it. Right. And then that's my way of being. I don't know who my enemies are. I don't think it's right for me to judge them or to punish them. And therefore, God, please, you take care of this for me. And that's my read of the text always. The story of the Exodus does not get told without talking about the hardships the Israelites endured. And for many, Seders come with their own sets of challenges. Jessica Grossman tells us about Passover and illness. Playwright Nikki Landau shares what happens when you welcome different kinds of strangers to your Seder. Palestinian activist and my co-host on the In Good Faith podcast series, Yafa Sakeja, tells us what it was like to be a guest at a Seder and hear the parts about God pouring wrath upon the nations.
So I was thinking that the last time I saw you was, I think it was grade 4 or 5, because you kind of like left Bialik Hebrew Day School. I remember you were sort of in and out for a while, and I only mention this because I think I know the answer based on watching an Instagram video of yours. But I'm curious to hear what happened around there, if you could launch into your story.
So I was diagnosed with Crohn's at age 9, but I was still going to school and, taking meds and trying to manage it. But I wasn't able to eat a lot. So I remember having to stay in the classroom when everyone went into the multipurpose room for lunch. I would stay back. And when I was 12, that was like the last big trip to the hospital. So I had my bat mitzvah and then I got sick. And I was told that my colon had essentially become toxic and I was going to die unless I had it and some of my small intestine removed. And that was kind of that.
For the benefit of our listeners who don't know who you are, aren't amongst your tens of thousands of followers, I wonder if you could sort of describe the professional turn, if you want to call it that you took.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I am the founder and spokesperson of an online awareness organization called Uncover Ostomy. I was the first person on the internet, I guess, to promote positive ostomy awareness from the perspective of a young woman. I did lean into sexualizing it a bit, which, that's what sells on the internet, and basically showing that this life-saving surgery isn't a terrible, gross, awful thing that previously had been the standard understanding of what ostomy surgery was. And that's kind of what has been going on that side of things for, over 15 years, I think.
You mentioned earlier that you had to eat separately. Food was an issue. Obviously, you seem like somebody with a lot of dietary restrictions. I was sort of surprised when I mentioned this opportunity for a Passover-themed episode. You said Passover was your favorite holiday. Passover, as you and all of our listeners know, is probably the biggest food-related holiday in Judaism. What was it like for you when you were going through some of this as a kid, and then, and I guess throughout your life? Like, basically, why is Passover your favorite holiday if it's
Not the
is there a
food.
lot of stuff you can't eat?
I mean, there is some really good Passover food that I could still eat. The Rutte, amazing, and that's probably my favorite Passover thing. As a kid, I still could eat the matzah, but I have a great family who would make things for me that I could eat. I definitely have more dietary restrictions now than I did then, actually. My mom's favorite story, I think, is as part of the Crohn's disease diet, you're not supposed to have like little seeds. So my mom would literally take strawberries and peel them just to make sure I could have them. Yeah, like to that degree. Yeah, she's always made sure that I have had something to eat, which, whatever holiday it would be. But I think Passover has always been my favorite holiday because that's when everyone really gets together. Throughout my childhood, we had really, really big Seders, like extended family. There'd be like 100 of us. That was probably my favorite part, is being with everyone.
This year, anyone who's following you on social media knows you're going through a troublesome cancer journey right now. And obviously that's also coinciding with Passover. I wonder if you could sort of bring people up to speed on right now.
Yeah. In November 2025 was diagnosed with rectal cancer. And now I am just waiting to basically prepare my body for radiation, which is my next treatment plan. 5 weeks of radiation 5 times a week, which is quite daunting and going to take over a lot of my life. So not looking forward to that.
You don't have to answer in any way you want, but I mean, I asked if you were going to Passover this year. You said no. Can you walk me through a little bit of that decision?
Yeah. Being around a lot of people, I still have an affected immune system. I love my nephew very much, but he is 3 years old and goes to daycare with other 3-year-olds who are very germy, and I don't want to risk getting anything like. So I just want to maintain, a healthy body, and as I go into radiation, and being around, a big group of people, close quarters at where it will be this year is a little bit scary for me right now, unfortunately.
Is this the first time you're missing it?
Yeah, I think so, because my family made sure to do Passover during COVID. We did virtual. So yeah, we did 2 of those. So I didn't even miss them then. So I do think this is the first one I'll be missing, though my mom did say she will FaceTime me in. So maybe I won't fully miss it. Just most of it.
How hard of a decision was that?
I think I'm very good at compartmentalizing everything that's going on. I think maybe I learned as a kid and as a patient, being 13 years old and dealing with death. To me, this is just kind of like another one of those situations where you just put it in the box and deal with it as you have to, but otherwise just keep moving forward. And maybe that's delusional of me or not healthy. I am not a mental health professional, but it's working so far. So I'm a little sad.
Okay,
but
Yafa.
It is what it is.
So
right?
glad to be chatting with you again.
Always good to talk to you, Uppy. How are you?
I am good. I'm gearing up for Passover. What do you know about Passover?
I watched a lot of Rugrats growing up.
Look, Moses in front of us! The ocean! Great! All this way for a dead end. Now we got a turtle round. Pharaoh! I got you now, baby!
So, I don't know. When I watched the Rugrats Passover episode when we were younger, we didn't think of this as like a Jewish story. We were just like, oh, this is a story in pop culture that now I love and I think it's aware of. And then we have been invited to Seders when we were younger. So when we were little girls, we went to my dad's best friend's house and we participated, and that was really cool. I really loved being part of it. And then actually recently, I've been invited a little bit more, I guess, because of all of the peace work we're doing in Toronto. And I went to one recently, and they did talk about new things that I hadn't heard before.
Like what?
It's like what? Punishing our enemies type thing. I was like, oh, okay, this was not in the Rugrats episode.
So you've heard this before about our enemies being punished.
I have, yeah.
I want to ask you about that. And I guess that's the kind of the passage that I've always, like, every time we get to this part in the Passover Seder, like, I end up thinking about people that some people might consider my enemies. I might not consider them my enemies, and how they would react to this. Again, you are not my enemy. We are close, no. But you are an other. You are not on the in group of like the Jewish community, for which the Seder is really like the moment of formation of like the nation.
I think you just asked me, like, how did it feel when I was in a room and people were like, and we're going to rain down fury on our enemies. It was like, I never really thought about it before, but it was the first time I was like, wait, who's the enemy? And like, I think if at that time this was past October 7th, but before this recording, like, it did feel like, when you take like a bite of a shishito pepper and you think it's not spicy, but it's actually really spicy. You're like, woo, wasn't prepared for that. Don't know if that's like conflated with modern day. Don't know who's the enemy. Doesn't feel good, because I was invited as a guest, and then I also had my child with me, and I was like, ooh, what is my kid going to take from this? But it was just sort of like, of course, I'm not going to tell you if you have the right to believe. You can believe what you believe. Maybe saying it in front, like, I'm also not just an other. We're all human beings. So, even the idea of like you saying you're othering me is also offensive, and isn't there something about us like treating strangers like they are ourselves, and like, so I don't know, it doesn't feel great. At the same time, did I complain? I'm in someone's house, I'm eating food, and then I go home like, okay, are there people that actually believe in present day like Palestinians need to have fury rained on them because of this story?
Well, yeah, so I guess, if you think about the fact that this text was written by people who were probably never in a position to have revenge or to have any sort of vengeance, and so they're outsourcing it to God. They're like, look, we can't do any of this stuff because we're not in a position of power, but we want God to be able to know. We want to remind God, this is your job. You got to get on this. I think that's kind of a really nice thing for a hopeless people to have, when you don't have hope, to say, oh, I can't do anything. I don't have power, but God's going to take care of this for me. And now we have to remember that that's kind of like not our job.
Hi, I'm Nikki Landau, and these are my thoughts on Passover. I have, like most people, I think, I have two Seders. One was always really big and really boisterous. And my dad would run both Seders, and he would try to sort of keep a handle on all my, my aunts and uncles and cousins and all the little conversations that would happen. But my favorite part of the Seder as a kid was not the Afikomen. It was actually the 4 kids part, the part where they have to ask, they ask the question about Seder, and they're sort of dealt with separately accordingly to how they asked. And there's the wicked child, there's the wise child, there's the simple child, and there's the child who doesn't know how to ask a question. And I don't know how my dad did it, but every year the simple child would fall to my Uncle Frank to read. I can read around the table, everybody reads a part. With 40 to 60 people, I don't know how my dad would land it on my Uncle Frank every time, but seamlessly it always landed on him, and everybody laughed. And then one year, I think my dad sort of must have gotten distracted, because the simple child was going to land way up the table from my Uncle Frank, and everybody was looked very nervous about it, because this was tradition. And without saying a word, just as sort of one unit, my uncles and my cousins, about 7 or 8 of them, just stood up and stepped back from the table so that my Uncle Frank would have to read The Simple Child. It was such a beautiful, hilarious, improv moment that it just, everybody laughed for about 10 or 15 minutes, so we couldn't get back to the Seder for a while. On my mom's side, it's a very different Seder, because she's really has a unique approach. She's really embraced the idea of, in the Seder about being kind to the stranger in your midst. And she has invited into the Seder
friends and loved ones who aren't Jewish. So, we have a Palestinian family who are coming for the second year in a row. They're dear friends, and they came from the West Bank. And one of the first things they did in Canada was come join us for the Seder. And it was their first Seder, and they were fascinated by the story. We had great conversations. And there's a Muslim couple who have been friends, with my family for so many years that they feel like family, and they've been coming to the Seder every year. And it really is a beautiful way to embrace that part of the Seder that talks about we need to be kind to, the stranger in our midst, because we can never forget that we were strangers in the land.
Yeah, we just gonna cool it out on this one. We gonna talk about redeeming ourselves. So cold. This is my redemption song. As I take the second cup of wine, I recline.
The Exodus from Egypt is a partial realization, the beginning of God fulfilling the commandments that he made to Abraham and the promises that he made to Abraham. And this year, amid this war that certainly our friends and family in Israel are living through and has all kinds of potential further terrible implications, but thinking about a lot of different things. But I've also been listening to this amazing song that I discovered on Amazon, that it's, Paro b'pijama, like Pharaoh in his pajamas in the middle of the night, which is a reference to the 10th plague and, how this terrible thing happens in the middle of the night. And then Pharaoh basically says to Bnei Israel, to the Israelites, okay, get the hell out of here, enough. And then the chorus of the song is Hageula ba'emtza halayla, right? That the redemption comes in the middle of the night. And so that's true for the Pesach story. And it's, I just feel like we're in this war and the world is dark. And I feel like we're, getting closer to midnight on the nuclear clock, and singing and thinking about the redemption in Pesach. Somehow that connects to how I'm feeling about Shvo Chamatcha right now, about our asking God to pour out his wrath on the nations, and that there really are people who want to hurt us. And I think that that's also reflected in the imagery that we see in Haggadot through the ages that I've been looking at. So on the Shvo Chamatcha pages, what's in the borders, right? So I was looking at one Haggadah from the 16th century that had Judith holding Holofernes' head. It's an apocryphal story. It's not actually preserved in the Bible, but there's this amazing story about, her whole city being saved through her actions, really her genius, but also the implication is God helping her do that, right? And Samson pulling down the pillars on the tyrants of Gaza in the period of the Judges. And then this other Haggadah had woodcuts, the Messiah arriving on his ass, right? What does this look like? What are we asking for when we say Shvo Chamatcha? And how does this relate to our relationships with the people around us? And that's sort of what I'm thinking about this Pesach.
Pesach fills me with a lot of joy. I feel like it's all the best things about Judaism. And I have this nice feeling about all these different families doing it all at the same time, a very unifying thing. It's very personal, it's very close of Judaism. And we're supposed to imagine ourselves like we're going out every year. And I think that I feel that. I mean, that's why my wife and I never really hesitate for the work. I really love it. I really love it. I'm looking forward to it, in spite of the fact that it's always so busy. It's always so busy. I just really love it. So I hear Yedida, what you're saying about the doom and gloom, but I think that the fact that we keep going through the Pesach, it is an absolute place of hope and survival too.
Nirtza, the end of the line, the last stop. For some, it's a quick fourth cup of wine and time for bed. For others, it's an opportunity to let loose and sing late into the night. Let's hear from musician and bandleader Lori Wolf about what happens when the lightweights have left the table, But first, Yiddish scholar Miriam Borden tells us the story about the rabbis telling the story of the Haggadah late into the night.
My name is Miriam Borden. I am a Yiddishist at the University of Toronto, also an amateur drummer, and somebody who spends a lot of time thinking about Magid. Why Magid? Well, at some point in the Seder, usually 40 minutes in, someone looks at the table and sort of says, are we ever going to eat? And honestly, fair. Magid feels like a chaotic group chat. There are questions. There are tangents. There are ancient rabbis who seem to be arguing. And then suddenly you have Lavan, which is sort of a twist. But here's the thing. It feels like bad storytelling when really this is about how you teach. So we sit down for the Seder and we assume that the goal is to tell the Exodus story. But the rabbis already know that story. And we already know that story, right? It's in the Bible. So instead, what Magid is all about is something more radical. Magid is basically a sort of live teaching lab. It's not, here's the story, but it's like, how do you tell the story? How do you ask about it? How do you argue within it? How do you expand upon it? How do you make it feel like yours? Because that is actually one of the main directives of the whole Seder, right? Is to consider yourself as if you were personally redeemed. So how do you do that, actually? And the key scene that anchors all of this is Bnei Brak, right? You have these 5 rabbis sitting all night in Bnei Brak, talking about the Exodus until sunrise. First of all, the guest list at that Seder is stacked. And none of this is random. This is kind of the full range of rabbinic personalities, and they're all sitting around one table. And Bnei Brak is really, really important, right? They're not in Jerusalem, right? They're not in Toronto. They're in Mississauga. The temple is gone. They're in Bnei Brak, which is kind of a regular place. It's not the center of activity. And that's really the point, right? That now, we're post-temple times, we're dispersed. Judaism happens around the table now. It happens in conversation. We're not talking about sacrifices in the temple anymore. We're talking about talking. And that's really the point. So Magid jumps around, right? There are questions. There are 4 sons. What's happening in those moments is we're sort of recreating that room. You have multiple voices. You have different levels of interpretation. You have disagreement. You have sort of side quests, right? And the side quest is really interesting. You have this Lavan moment. Lavan shows up. Lavan, the uncle of the patriarch Jacob. And you're like, wait a second, this is the wrong villain in this story. What happened to Pharaoh, right? But what's really going on here is the rabbis are teaching us something. They're saying this story, this doesn't actually start with Pharaoh. You might think it does. It doesn't, actually. What we're talking about here is a much longer history. Magid is not disorganized, actually. Well, no, it is disorganized. It's also very layered, right? You're learning how to ask questions. You're learning how to teach the story in ways you didn't even imagine. You're learning how to argue. You're learning how to stretch the story. And then finally, you're actually learning how to see yourself in it. Yiddishists love to ask the 4 questions in Yiddish. I prefer mua sapru, mua dabru. You know that one?
No.
Which is Echad mi yodea, but in Yiddish. Moshe Oisher, the great chazan and actor and showman, does a great version of this. It goes, mua sapru, mua dabru, was die Einsbarkeit, einer ist Gott. Yeah, it goes like that and kind of, and goes through everything up to 13. What asking the 4 questions in Yiddish does, what singing mua sapru, mua dabru does, what it can do, offer that kind of kaleidoscopic view that the Haggadah already encourages us to take, right? Kaleidoscopic view back through history. What links us to the people who came before us? In sort of a collective sense, it's the Exodus story. It's sitting down for a Seder every year at the same time as every other Jew on the planet. In a much more sort of tactile sense, though, I think, whether you're introducing Yiddish songs, whether you're introducing Ladino songs, whatever you're introducing to your Seder, these are ways that link us much more immediately to those who came before. You know, the guy who used to lead my Seder, when I was growing up, is a guy who used to lead it in this beautiful Ashkenazi Hebrew, a Polish Holocaust survivor, who led it in this beautiful Burech Atu, beautiful, beautiful. And I wish I could replicate that for my own family, because it's music, It's music, and there's nothing like it. It keeps the text of the Haggadah alive and open. We think of it as this very stable text. It's anything but, actually. It's this incredible composite. It's incredibly multi-layered, like a palimpsest, and introducing other texts keeps it alive and open. It's one of the great traditions of Pesach, is to kind of create a new Haggadah. Everybody's always doing it. Why can't we?
Hi, I'm Laurie Wolf, band leader of The Horror Machine and Queen Kong, and founder of the Toronto Klezmer Society, and I'm going to tell you about one of my favorite Pesach memories. So I grew up going to big family seders every year, and what I remember most isn't actually the formal parts. It's the end, like the real end, when almost everyone had gone to bed, and what's left is a slightly chaotic, semi-unsupervised after-party. The table's a disaster. There's crumbs everywhere, half-eaten dessert, cups of tea that are somehow still being held even though they've been cold for an hour, and the only people still there are the ones who've made a very questionable life choice, which includes me, my cousin Eva, who's around my age, and a few siblings. Now, Eva would arrive having already done an entire Seder because her family started at a reasonable hour. Mine started after candlelighting, which in late March is basically the middle of the night. So she's coming fresh off one Seder, and we're like, great, now the night can actually begin. And without ever saying it out loud, it's just understood. We are staying until the very last word. So we get to the end, to Nirtzah, we say Lashana Haba Yerushalayim, and then comes the final stretch. We start with Echad Me'odea, and suddenly we're all very passionate about counting, banging on the table like this is urgent information. Echad Me'odea, like there are 4 people left at the table. It does not matter. And then Chad Gadya, and that's where things really fall apart, in the best way. I am the goat. Not assigned, just accepted. Eva is everything else. She's the cat, the dog, the stick, switching roles mid-song like she's doing a one-woman show no one asked for, but everyone needs, and we're up and we're moving around and we're fully committed and trying not to step on children who are asleep across 2 chairs with coats on them like laundry. And at the same time, we're both waiting because there's one final challenge. We have to slam the Haggadah shut exactly on the last drawn-out syllable. Exactly. So now we're acting and we're singing and we're tracking the ending like it's a professional sport. And of course, the last line goes on forever. It just keeps going. So we're standing there with the books ready, holding, waiting, and then bang, perfect timing. We didn't wake a single kid, which is honestly the most impressive part. And then we just sit down and we're completely exhausted and slightly delirious, like, okay, we did it. And that's the part I remember. Not the structure, not the matzah, the afikomen. It just, that feeling at the end, being way too tired and laughing at nothing, and somehow deciding that this is very, very important. And that's the part that we always carry with us, and probably the part you end up recreating later with your kids, which is how things go, isn't it? And that's my favorite Pesach memory.
I'm paying all these bills on my cellular. I put the stud in student, put the man in semantics, put the Jew in jukeboxes, put the pro in prophylactics. University educated, yo, check the deep flow. Rise up, scream out that you gotta let your peeps go.
Thank you for listening to the 5th annual Great Canadian Seder. Our producer and editor is Zachary Kaufman. Michael Freeman is the executive producer. To catch every episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support our show, consider making a donation to the CJN at thecjn.ca/donate. Wishing you and all your loved ones a Chag Kasher V'Sameach.
Ce Dieu unique, c'est lui qui fera justice à l'agneau face à ses poursuivants. Cet agneau qui est le symbole du peuple.